Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Real Talk with the GMan. I'm your host, G. William Scott. With using this forum instead of platform, rather than blog talk radio, has been a problem. So we're going to really try to perfect this and really get this thing going. Um, we so we're going to come right to the point. We're coming right to the screen right now. I see that there. We invite you to be a part of this new forum, new platform, same forum, same program, and the same information. So let's begin our program this evening. This is Sunday, August the 25th, 2024. Let us begin by reading the disclaimer, copyright disclaimer. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. I'm going to play a clip for you right now, and it's from the Kim Iverson show, and it's concerning Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsing Donald Trump. Here we go.
Trump rally in Glendale, Arizona. We're going to go over some of what he said. In fact, let's go ahead and load. I was able to grab a little bit of this. We're kind of on the fly right now because this is happening in real time. He's standing on the stage, and we wanted to see what he had to say or what type of reception he had. And it is absolutely incredible, the reception. In fact, let's go ahead and play. I mean, we're going to go over what Kennedy, he's suspending his campaign. He says he's not. If you caught the show last week when we had Larry Sharp on the show, then you watched us debate whether or not Robert F. Kennedy Jr. should drop out of the race and endorse Trump or stay in the race to get that 5% of the vote, which would pave the way towards a third party. And it turns out he's doing both, which we didn't even think about this as an option, but clearly Bobby did, and it's a really smart move. He's keeping his name on the ballot in the firmly red and blue states where he's not going to be a spoiler, and he's hoping to still grab that 5% so that he could end up creating an independent party. He's also removing his name, however, from the swing.
I'm trying to get this thing so you can hear it better.
His speech and his explanation. Can we just this reception that he has received in Arizona at the Trump rally, this goes to show he did not make a mistake today in announcing that he was endorsing Trump and partnering with him in creating sort of a unity party. Watch this. Playing Foo Fighters, There Goes My Hero. They've got fireworks going for the guy. The crowd is going wild. Trump even says this is the loudest, craziest reception. The crowd has gone crazier for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. than they have for anybody.
And I don't think I've ever introduced anyone that got applause like he just got. I must tell you, I don't think it's true. I don't think I've ever introduced anybody that got applause like that. Amazing. It's true.
his name. This is the most incredible reception he could have ever dreamed of. And this is a major Republican convention. This is not, it would be great if this would have been an independent, an independent third party type thing, because that would be awesome. We want to break the duopoly. But the fact that the Republican Party, the Republican base, have embraced him this way, this is so completely opposite of how the Democrats have treated him. I mean, think about the difference of how Democrats have just shunned him. They've called him a conspiracy theorist. They have smeared him in every single mainstream liberal publication they can. They barely would interview him. They've treated him like a parasite. And he turns around, endorses Donald Trump, and this is the reception he gets. Imagine had he said, you know what, I'm suspending my campaign. I don't want to be a spoiler, and I'm going to go ahead and endorse Kamala. Do you think that the Democrats would have invited him to a rally? No, they just would have said he did that. They would have put out press releases and in interviews, barely would have mentioned his name. They would have said, well, he did the right thing. He dropped out. He didn't have a chance anyway. So they would have continued to treat him like crap. Meanwhile, the Republican Party has embraced him. Trump has embraced him. They gave him fireworks. Trump didn't even walk out to fireworks. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. walked out to fireworks and an embracing crowd. This is absolutely incredible. Okay, I want to get to what his remarks were earlier today. He explained himself. He explained why he's officially endorsing Donald Trump, why he's still where he's doing this dance, where he's still staying in the race. Well, he's not. He's suspending his campaign, but he still will be on the ballot in certain states. And there's still a possibility. He even explains there's still a possibility he could end up in the White House as president. There is still a chance. But he's also not going to be a spoiler, and he's endorsing Donald Trump. Watch this.
Our polling consistently showed that by staying on the ballot in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats, with whom I disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and chronic disease. Well, I want everyone to know that I am not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it and not ending it. My name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible. In fact, today our polling shows them tying at 269 to 269. And I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. But in about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me. It's with a sense of victory and not defeat that I'm suspending my campaign activities. I was a ferocious critic of many of the policies during his first administration, and there are still issues and approaches upon which we continue to have very serious differences. We are aligned with each other on other key issues like ending the forever wars, ending the childhood disease epidemics, securing the border, protecting freedom of speech, unraveling the corporate capture of our regulatory agencies, getting the U.S. intelligence agencies out of the business of propagandizing and censoring and surveilling Americans and interfering with our elections. 4 more years of Democratic rule will complete the consolidation of corporate and neocon power, and our children will be the ones who suffer most.
Okay, that's pretty much the gist of it. Independent presidential action as a third-party insurgent said he would suspend his long-shot White House bid Friday, withdraw from the battleground state ballots, and endorse Republican nominee Donald Trump. What do you think about this? What do you What is your opinion concerning this matter in terms of whether it's a good idea, whether it's not, whatever the case may be? What exactly is the situation there? Uh, my wife is saying hi, dear. You can come on if you wish. That's up to you, but you can just be there and listen to the program if that's your desire as well. We're so happy to report that my wife, who just recently, just about 3 weeks ago now, had brain surgery to remove an aneurysm. The operation went successful, though there was a snitch, I guess, or a glitch, I guess would be the best word, a glitch in the operation somehow or another. It left her blind in her right eye. But we're believing that that it's not over till it's over. That's my motto. It's not over till it's over, and God is the final word in it all. So we continue to pray for her. Her attitude is one that almost like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the three Hebrew men who were there with Nebuchadnezzar, and when they were being threatened with, and eventually was thrown into the fiery furnace because they did not bow down to the idols and the gods of Nebuchadnezzar nor his golden. They would be thrown into the fiery furnace, and their response was, "We know that our God can deliver us and will deliver us, but if He doesn't, but if that's not His will, if He determines that He wants to bring us home with Him, we're still going to stand for what God stands for. We're going to do what God does. We're going to listen and heed His word." And so my wife is pretty much has the same attitude. She knows that God is able. She's seen it. He's performed it in her life and my life, miracles and healings and all of that. And we know that God is certainly able to do it and can do it and probably will do it. But if He doesn't, she's going to hold on to God's unchanging hand, that it'll be God that'll take her through. Where whatever she can't see, God will reveal to her and will strengthen the left eye, which we're about ready to do now, going into the ophthalmologists and neurosurgeons in this coming month to see what can be done about that. But keep her in your prayers. That's the bottom line of it all. And we know that God is able, and we trust in Him and His will. And like Christ said in Gethsemane, not my will, but thy will be done. So keep her in prayer. She's truly a warrior. She's more than a conqueror, and she's my hero. She's my hero. So getting back to the subject matter of this evening, Kenny announced that he's going to suspend his campaign with Caverts after several turbulent months of declining poll numbers, accumulating debt, and reemerging controversies. He feels that this is time now for he to step back. He's as we heard a moment ago, he's not going to totally leave the contest, but he is going to, and he wants you to vote for him. Those states that are not what we call battleground states, but battleground states would include Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and other battleground states. He's encouraging his supporters not to vote in those states, for it would be spoiler states. It would benefit one or the other candidates. And the other two is Vice President Kamala Harris for the Democrats and Donald J. Trump for the Republicans. So there you have it. What do you think about it? Do you think it's going to benefit Trump at all that Kennedy is now jumping on the bandwagon, or somewhat so, certainly endorsing him? Do you think that will help the Trump campaign, in particular when it comes to independents and third-party persons, as well as those who have not committed themselves to which candidate they would vote for? Do you think he's an asset, or do you think he would be a liability? We will see as time goes on. Now, this past week we had the Democratic National Convention in the windy city of Chicago, Illinois. It ended on this past Thursday, August the 22nd. Highlights include on Monday night, Biden passes the torch to Kamala Harris on first night of the DNC. Vice President Kamala Harris made a surprise early appearance at the Democratic Convention on the night of President Joe Biden's speech. One of his last major appearances before he leaves office in 5 months. President Joe Biden formally passed the torch to his vice president, Kamala Harris, as a packed convention hall screamed and chanted in adoration for the prolonged stretch as he took the stage Monday night. For about 5 minutes after Biden appeared just before 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time, thousands of delegates and supporters cheered for him in a show of thanks for the decades he has served as a public figure. Convention organizers handed out "We Love Joe" signs before the president's speech, with the crowd held up and chanted in addition, "Thank you, Joe." Biden's daughter Ashley introduced him, and he dabbed his tears from his eyes as he took the stage and embraced her. First Lady Jill Biden, who spoke shortly before her husband, also teared up and appeared visibly emotional throughout the final portion of the evening, including during the sustained standing ovation the president received. "I love you all, folks," he said. "In America, I love you." Biden opened his speech by rallying the crowd for Harris in a bittersweet moment that marks the unofficial end of his half-century in politics. He then turned to what he and other Democrats have categorized as the historic nature of his presidency, including multiple pieces of consequential legislation that passed under his leadership. At one point, reminding the audience that Harris served as the tie-breaking vote on many of his more important bills, seeking to prop her up even as he celebrated his own accomplishments. Let me ask you, are you ready to vote for freedom? Biden asked at the opening of his speech. Are you ready to vote for democracy and for America? Let me ask you, are you ready to vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walsh as President and Vice President of the United States? Rather than accepting his party's nomination this week, Biden instead headlined the opening night of a historic convention that will see the Democratic Party nominate the first woman of color to lead its ticket. I noticed that the establishment news media has decided to use the broad definition of what Kamala Harris is, the first woman of color, a move that would acknowledge and bring acceptance to all of her mixed race heritage. No need to alienate the Black, Asian Indians, and Jamaican voters, right? Biden, who spoke for more than 45 minutes, took a sort of victory lap over his 4 years in office and sought to cement his legacy. He also spoke of the work that still lies ahead for him to do, supporting Ukraine against its invasion of Russia, securing a ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas to end the devastating war in Gaza, and bringing home wrongfully detained Americans. While he was speaking, a small group of delegates protesting Biden's handling of Israel's war in Gaza sought to stage a demonstration during his speech, holding up a banner that read, "Stop arming Israel," but was quickly drowned out by the enthusiastic convention delegates and Biden supporters. At many points, Biden spoke angrily about the threats he said Trump posed, including to American democracy and international alliances. His speech was frequently interrupted by chants from the audience. Earlier in the evening, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the 2016 Democratic presidential nominee, celebrated the various women who preceded her and Harris, marking the historic nature of Harris's nomination and the echoes between her role and Harris's. 8 years ago, it was Clinton who was headlined a triumphant Democratic convention and appeared poised to be the nation's first woman president, only to lose to Trump in a race that devastated the party. Quote, Clinton says, "Afterwards, we refused to give up America. We marched, many ran for office. We kept our eyes on the future. Well, my friends, the future is here. Clinton joined the other speakers in expressing gratitude for Biden's record. Let's salute President Biden, she said. He has been democracy's champion at home and abroad. He brought dignity, decency, and confidence back to the White House. And he showed what it means to be a true patriot. Thank you, Joe Biden, for your lifetime of service and leadership. Next, on Monday evening's roster, was Jill Biden, who took the stage shortly before her husband appeared, citing the times he had comforted grieving people he met on the campaign trail, but stopped to encourage a child who suffered from a stutter, saying Biden knows that America's greatness comes in part from small acts of kindness, she added. Kamala Harris knows that too. Then Harris herself made a brief special appearance early in the proceedings to a rapturous reception from the crowd. The vice president emphasized that she wanted, quote, to celebrate our incredible president, Joe Biden. She added, Joe, thank you for your historic leadership, your lifetime of service to our nation, and all you will continue to do. The pomp and circumstances offered President Biden that evening overshadowed the fact that Biden had come under unrelenting pressure from Democrats to step aside after his June 27th debate performance against Trump that for many in his party renewed questions about his ability to defeat the former president and potentially his fitness to serve a second term. The president bitterly fought leaders of his party for more than 3 weeks, insisting he was best postured to beat and defeat Trump before deciding to drop his reelection bid on July the 21st. Oh, the pure hypocrisy. Because in spite of all the praise of Biden, many of those celebrating his presidency when he passed numerous pieces of consequential legislation long sought by Democrats and led the U.S. response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine are the same folk who pressured him to leave the race even as he resisted. Thus ending Monday, day one. On Tuesday, day two, August the 20th, Barack and Michelle Obama make the case for Harris take on Trump in fiery speeches. Barack and Michelle Obama urge Democrats to unite behind Vice President Kamala Harris on the second night of the party's convention in Chicago on Tuesday, challenging the assembled delegates and voters at home to harness the enthusiasm surrounding Harris's candidacy to defeat Donald Trump in November. Quote, we do not need 4 more years of bluster and bumbling and chaos. We have seen that movie before, and we all know that the sequel is usually worse. Barack Obama said in his 34-minute address, America's ready for a new chapter. America's ready for a better story. We're ready for President Kamala Harris. The 44th president took on Trump directly, calling him a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down that golden escalator 9 years ago, unquote. But Biden also said Democrats cannot be complacent and must lay out a vision for the future. Quote, our job is to convince people that democracy can actually deliver. And in doing that, we can't just point to what we've already accomplished. We can't just rely on the ideals of the past. We need to chart a new way forward to meet the challenges of today. And Kamala understands this. Obama said, highlighting Democratic policies on housing, healthcare, the economy, immigration, and more. Michelle Obama struck a similar chord as her husband, noting, quote, that hope is making a comeback with Harris's candidacy, but imploring Democrats to get to work. It's up to us to remember what Kamala's mother told her. Don't just sit around and complain, do something. She went on to say, so if they lie about her, and they will, we've got to do something. If we see a bad poll, and we will, we've got to put down our phone and do something. On day 3, former President Bill Clinton rallies the crowd around clear choice in November. Former President Bill Clinton spoke to the crowd on night 3 of the DNC, thanking President Biden for his service, praising Kamala Harris, and emphasizing the high stakes of the November election. This is what he said. Let's cut to the chase. I am too old to gild the lily, said Clinton, who recently turned 78. But I'm still younger than Donald Trump, he added, and a raucous applause. The truth is, really, that Trump is age 78, and he turned 78 on June the 14th of this year. And Bill Clinton also is 78, both born in 1946, but Clinton was born in August of 1946, just 2 months apart. So he's not older in the truest sense of the word. Clinton went on to say, in 2024, we have a clear choice. We the people versus me, myself, and I. Clinton continued, we the people is, of course, the Wednesday theme of our convention. Not a day goes by that I'm not grateful, he continues, for the chance the American people gave me to be one of the 45 people who have held this job. Even on the bad days, you can still make something good happen. All we know about Clinton's bad days. Kamala Harris is the only candidate in this race with the vision, the experience, the temperament, the will, and yes, the sheer joy to do that on good and bad days, to be our voice, unquote. Clinton also made a point of praising his wife's speech earlier in the week. Hillary Clinton spoke, as we mentioned before, in the prime time slot on the opening night of the DNC, 2 days before her husband. She used her time at the podium as an opportunity to pass the torch to Harris, from one woman nominated as presidential candidate by a major party to another. Day 4, which is the final day, Thursday, August the 22nd. This is what happened. This was the closing day of the 2024 Democratic National Convention. Of course, the highlight and much anticipated moment was the acceptance speech of the 2024 Democratic presidential nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris. 4 takeaways from Kamala Harris's convention speech. The first, Harris promoted her middle-class roots. Many Americans know who Miss Harris is, but not many know what she believes or details of her background. First and foremost, her convention speech set out a chain to change that. She recounted her mother's journey as an immigrant from India. She spoke about her parents, how her parents met, and how they ultimately divorced. She talked about her childhood upbringing in the working class neighborhood in Oakland, California. She said this, the middle class is where I come from. My mother kept a strict budget. We lived within our means, yet we wanted for more, for little. And she expected us to make the most of the opportunities that were available to us. Ms. Harris also spoke of why she chose to become a lawyer and a prosecutor. She drew a line from the early days in the courtroom to be a public servant as a politician. Quote, my entire career, I've only had one client, she said, the people. Number 2, Harris projected and shared with the audience, as well as the American people as a whole, a vision for the future, with few details, we should add. Ms. Harris' speech included calls for unity and a pathway beyond, quote, the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of modern American politics. She said the U.S. had a precious, fleeting opportunity to chart a new path forward. That path, but that chart had few details. Vague calls for unity and a path beyond partisanship or rhetorical and rhetoric that many presidential hopefuls have used in the past. When Ms. Harris did turn to policy details, she spoke in generalities. She said she will focus on lowering the cost of everyday needs, including health care, housing, and groceries. She specifically called out abortion rights and framed it as a means of preserving freedom, which has been a recurring theme at this Democratic convention. Quote, America cannot truly be prosperous unless Americans are fully able to make their own decisions about their own lives, especially about matters of heart and home, she said. Ms. Harris, in her speech, styled herself as a center-left moderate, putting little daylight between her policies and those of her boss, the man she hopes to replace, Joe Biden. Quote, everywhere I go and everyone I meet, I see a nation ready to move forward, she said, ready for the next step in the incredible journey that is America. The exact details of that step, however, are to be determined, for she did not make any of that clear on that night. Another thing that she added in her speech was an unchanged Gaza war message. As pro-Palestinian protesters marched outside the convention, Ms. Harris devoted particular attention to the foreign policy section of her speech to the Gaza war. Here, yet again, there was little difference from her rhetoric and views and those of Mr. Biden. And she linked herself to the president several times. Quote, President Biden and I are working around the clock, she said, because now is the time to get a hostage deal and a ceasefire done. She also pledged to ensure that Israel always has the ability to defend itself and to take note of the brutality of the October 7th Hamas attack. For a moment, it sounded like some in the crowd were ready to jeer, but Ms. Harris quickly moved on to the plight of Palestinians, saying that the scale of their suffering was heartbreaking, quote unquote. That will hardly be enough to satisfy the protesters outside, however, and they could return to their homes, some in key battleground states like Michigan, convinced that a Harris policy would be a continuation of the Biden Gaza war policies. Next, she spoke about the obvious. Number 4, Trump is an unserious man, but a serious threat. 2 days ago, Michelle and Barack Obama formed the tag team that belittled former President Donald Trump for what they characterized as his small obsessions and petty personality. Ms. Harris also took swipes at her Republican opponent, but they were pretty standard fare for Democrats, including Mr. Biden over the past few months. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man, she said. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. She brought up the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol by Trump supporters and mentioned his criminal convictions. She also hit what has become a favorite Democratic punching bag, the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 blueprint for a Republican presidency. Although the former president has disavowed the plan, she noted that it was written by his advisors and it sought to what? Pull our country back into the past, quote unquote. The future versus the past contrast has been a central theme of the Harris campaign so far, as it is with her nomination acceptance speech. It was of the ways the vice president has been able to draw a distinction not only from her current Republican opponent, but from the unpopular aspects of her boss, Joe Biden, who just a few weeks ago was the presumptive Democratic nominee. A fact-finding group calling themselves Get the Facts analyzed some of the claims made by Kamala Harris during her acceptance speech. Kamala Harris spoke at the Democratic National Convention on Thursday to formally accept the party's nomination for president. We fact-checked the claims. Here's what we found. This is according to Get the Facts, a fact-finding group. The claim that Harris made was, consider the power he will have, especially after the United States Supreme Court just ruled that he would be immune from criminal prosecution. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails and how he would use an immense power of the presidency of the United States not to improve your life, but to strengthen our national security, but to serve the only client he has ever really considered, and that is himself. Get the facts. This is what the fact-finding group has analyzed and presented. The statement suggests that Donald Trump will have unchecked power if reelected, particularly emphasizing that the United States Supreme Court has ruled that he would be, quote, immune from criminal prosecution, unquote. This interpretation requires a careful fact check against the actual Supreme Court ruling in Trump versus the United States, July 1st, 2024. In regard to immunity from criminal prosecution, the court actually ruled that Trump, as former president, has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions that fall within his, quote, preclusive constitutional authority, which are core constitutional powers exclusive to the presidency. The court also stated, though, that Trump would have presumptive immunity for other less defined official acts, which could be challenged in court if the government can show that prosecuting these acts does not interfere with the functioning of the executive branch. Finally, the court ruled that there is no immunity for unofficial acts or acts outside the scope of presidential duties. Any crime committed through these acts could be prosecuted. Harris claims the Supreme Court has removed all constraints on Trump's actions if he were reelected, but if that were true, our guardrails would also be removed as Harris was president. So whatever stipulation that the Supreme Court makes will apply not only to Trump, but also to Harris. It's dealing with the presidency, not a particular president nor a particular party. The reality is that the ruling does not provide any president with absolute immunity for all actions. So they're rating this claim of Harris as being misleading. Claim number 2, we are not going back to when Donald Trump tried to cut Social Security and Medicaid. Get the facts. Harris and Democrats all week have claimed Trump wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. We rate that as mostly false. On the campaign trail, Trump has vowed to, quote, not to cut one penny from Social Security and Medicare. As president, he did propose cutting back some parts of Social Security, but not others. While he supported bipartisan efforts to reduce Medicare growth, these benefits would have not ever been touched. Rating, again, misleading. The next claim, Donald Trump tried to throw away your votes when he failed. He sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol where they assaulted law enforcement officers. Fact check. The statement refers to the events of January 6, 2021, when a mob of Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to overturn the 2020 presidential election results. Donald Trump did make claims of widespread voter fraud and attempted various legal challenges to overturn the election results, none of which were successful. On January 6, 2020, Trump held a rally where he encouraged his supporters to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard, but also use language like "fight like hell," quote unquote. The crowd subsequently marched to the Capitol, where some individuals violently attacked law enforcement officers and breached the Capitol building. While Trump did not directly send the mob, his rhetoric and actions have been widely criticized as contributing to the violence that occurred. Multiple investigations, including by the House Select Committee on January 6th attack, have scrutinized Trump's role in the event. The rating here is they feel that there are elements of truth certainly in it, though not directly responsible. Certainly his rhetoric incited those who were less restrained to attack the U.S. Capitol. Next claim. For an entirely different set of crimes, he was found guilty of fraud by a jury of everyday Americans and separately found liable for committing sexual abuse. Get the facts. Donald Trump has faced several legal challenges post presidency. In May of 2023, Trump was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation in the case brought by E. Jean Carroll. The jury awarded Carroll $5 million in damage. This was a civil case, not a criminal one. So Trump was not found guilty in the criminal sense, but he was held liable by the jury. Our fact-check partners at factcheck.org, after this, as part of a Q&A on Trump's conviction for 34 counts of fraud, Trump became the first U.S. president, current or former, to be convicted of a criminal offense with a 12-person jury in New York on May the 30th, found him guilty of 34 felony counts of business fraud as part of an illegal scheme to influence the 2016 election by making payments to suppress a sordid tale of sex with a porn star. The next claim. I think we already went over that one. And the answer was that they rated that true. Claim. Consider his explicit intent to set free violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers at the Capitol. Get the facts. Donald Trump has suggested that he might pardon individuals convicted in connection with the January 6th attack on the Capitol if he were to be reelected. This includes people who have been convicted of assaulting law enforcement officers. Trump has stated that he believes these individuals were treated unfairly, which has led to concerns that he might issue pardons for those involved in the January 6th insurrection. Rating of this claim, true. Claim, his explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as an enemy. Get the facts. This claim is based on Trump's statement that he's made about pursuing investigations or legal actions against political opponents and media figures. For example, during his presidency and afterwards, Trump has often expressed hostility toward journalists and political opponents, sometimes suggesting that they should be investigated or prosecuted. However, while Trump has made concerning statements about using the legal system against his adversaries, there has been no explicit, detailed policy proposals to jail journalists and political opponents. So they rate this as being misleading. We have some more that we could speak on, but basically some were partial truth, some were misleading, others were true, some were just downright fabrications in a sense. But we get the gist of the situation. Now we want to see what's happening from this point on. I want to talk about something that was disturbing during the that I forgot to speak on, and this is during the convention. Let me see what we have here. I'm trying to see this. I don't see it here. I don't know why I don't see it. I never wrote about it. Let's see. Let's see here. I wanted to talk about. Oh yes, this is what I want to talk about, and we're going to be finished for this evening. Along with what was going on inside the DNC, something quite disturbing was happening on the outside of the convention site. Along free abortions, vasectomies will be available to DNC attendees in Chicago. Of course, that was the first 2 days. Of course, it's all over now. This is what was happening while they were, dealing with the business of the party and all of the rest of that, getting the platform together inside, all the great speeches, all the not so great speeches, and all the rest of that. That was all going on the inside, on the outside, right on the outside, within a couple of blocks away from the convention center itself. Free abortions, vasectomies, and other contraceptive usages were being available. Attendees at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago will have, and did have, I'm now saying the past tense, did have the opportunity to get a free abortion or vasectomy, just blocks away. Vasectomy, I don't know. My mind is drifted away. Get a free abortion or vasectomy just blocks away from the event. And vasectomy appointments are filling up fast. Planned Parenthood Great Rivers, which serves most of Missouri and part of southern Illinois, is sending a mobile health center to the Windy City's West Loop to offer the reproductive services on Monday and Tuesday of the DNC meeting. Medication abortions are reported available on both days, except vasectomies are being exclusively offered on Monday, according to the New York Times. Vasectomies are reportedly in high demand, and there's already a waiting list. Quote, there are going to be people traveling to Chicago from all over the country, Dr. Colin McNichols, the chief medical officer of Planned Parenthood Great Rivers, told the paper. Quote, and I think we should be doing what we can as healthcare providers to show what the impact of good policy and bad policy is. The services will be provided on a sliding fee scale. Pay what you can and get the health care you need, according to the appointment reservation form, which only requires a name, date of birth, and basic contact information. One of the organizations in the decision to make abortions and contraceptives available at the site of the Democratic National Convention, yet Vice President Harris, who will be nominated as the Democratic presidential candidate, has been outspoken in her support for abortion rights after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, which had federally protected abortion access for half a century. Abortion has become one of the integral parts of Harris's campaign after several states passed their own strict abortion ban since the Supreme Court's decision in 2022. Harris has called abortion one of America's fundamental rights, fundamental freedoms. You call that coincidence? I say no. It was planned. This mobile abortion unit was planned, endorsed, sanctioned, and supported by Harris and the leftist progressive wing within the Democratic Party. That's what I believe. That her whole thing, now we know we have this thing called Reproductive Act, the Protection of Reproduction Act. Now, how can you protect reproduction, woman's reproduction, and yet kill off, in my humble estimation, the thing that she's producing? Who are you protecting? Just the woman? Wouldn't reproductive rights would include every part that was a part of the reproduction situation, which would be the woman and the child? It's just something to think about. The Reproductive Rights Act. But it only protects the rights of one of the two parties in the reproductive process. Interesting, isn't it? But we'll talk about that and other things as we move forward. We're going to talk about some of the policies in detail, the contrast between the two candidates. We're going to also be talking about over the next few weeks as we move toward November the 5th. We're going to talk about the Electoral College. How is the president and the vice president actually elected? Do our votes really count? Do we really select the president and select the vice president in our voting? And if not, why do we vote? Who is actually do we vote for? And what is their power? What is their authority? And finally, what group, what organization, what body of government actually decides on who the next president and vice president is? So we're going to talk about that because I think a lot of people don't know much about the process. They really believe the hype, if you will, that our votes count, that we actually elect the president. Keep in mind, before we leave here, remember two examples. In 2020, George W. Bush ran against Al Gore. Now, Al Gore was the vice president under Bill Clinton. And of course, George W. was the governor of Texas. Now, Al Gore, receives more popular votes by a large number, than did George W. But George W. had enough delegate votes in the Electoral College to become the next president. Hear me again. In 2020, George W. Bush ran as the Republican candidate for the presidency, and Al Gore ran as the Democratic candidate for the presidency. Al Gore had more popular votes. That means more people voted for Al Gore than they did George W. Bush. However, George W. Bush got more votes in the Electoral College than did Al Gore. And so therefore, George W. Bush became the 43rd president of the United States. The same happened in 2016. Hillary Clinton was the Democratic nominee. Donald Trump was the Republican nominee. Hillary had many more popular votes. The people voted larger for her by a large majority than they did Donald Trump. However, Donald Trump had more votes in the Electoral College than did Hillary Clinton. And because of that, once again, Donald Trump became the 45th president of the United States. And we're going to tell you, we're going to get into great detail how that works. Who do we really vote for in November? How is it that you can have more popular votes and yet not have enough Electoral College votes to become president? What is it? How does it work? We're going to talk about that. And then after Electoral College is over, they then hand it over on December the 8th, and then then another group decides whether they're going to accept the reports of the Electoral College, and then they will decide at that point who becomes president of the United States. So we're going to talk about all of that, how government works. We're going to talk about some of the more important facts in terms of this candidacy. We already talked about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsing Donald Trump We're going to talk about another thing. We're going to talk about there's a scuttlebutt going on, and a good conversation to have. Is Donald Trump sabotaging his own candidacy? These and other interesting points of view and factual points of view will be discussed in later broadcasts of our program, Real Talk with the G-Man. Next time, we're going to have more people involved. We were just kind of throwing this out, seeing how it works. And we hope that we did give you some information that you can use, that you can think about, that you can draw your own conclusions concerning. Until next time, we say good evening, good night, and goodbye.